All right. Welcome back to Vuln Vibes, everybody. Back for another deep dive with WP SafeBlock.
That's right.
And as always, we're focusing on those high and critical WordPress vulnerabilities.
Yep, the ones that keep you up at night.
Exactly. And, we've got a pretty interesting one today, something that I think is going to really resonate with a lot of our listeners because it involves a plugin.
Oh, yeah, this one's a bit of a doozy.
It is.
Yeah.
And it, kind of exposes a vulnerability that's, I think, becoming more and more common these days.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Next-Gen Social Login Pro plugin.
So convenient, right? Just log in with your Facebook or Google account. No
Yeah.
need to remember another password.
Exactly. Super convenient for users, but as we're going to see, potentially a huge security risk for site owners. And, specifically, we're looking at versions 3.1.16 and earlier. So if you're running an older version of this plugin, buckle up.
Time to update, folks.
Big time. So, for those who aren't familiar, Next-Gen Social Login Pro lets users log into a WordPress site using their social media accounts.
Facebook, Google, Twitter, even Apple. You name it, they've got it.
Right. And it's become pretty ubiquitous. I mean, you see it everywhere, right?
It's everywhere, which is what makes this vulnerability so concerning.
Exactly. So let's get into the nitty-gritty. We're dealing with an authentication bypass vulnerability.
Yes, a critical one.
Critical, yes. And specifically through the Apple OAuth integration. So, before we, I guess, go any further, maybe a quick OAuth 101.
Yeah, OAuth stands for Open Authorization. It's basically a framework that lets users grant third-party apps access to their account information on another service, like Apple, without having to give away their password.
Right. So, I can use my Google account to log into Spotify without giving Spotify my Google password.
Precisely. It's all about delegating access securely.
Got it. So where does Next-Gen go wrong with Apple OAuth?
Well, in this case, the plugin didn't properly verify the user's identity during the OAuth process. Essentially, an attacker could use a simple email address to impersonate any user on the site. They wouldn't even need a password.
So let me get this straight. If someone knows my email address, they could potentially hijack my account on any site using this plugin with Apple login. That's kind of scary.
Scary indeed. And remember, we're not just talking about regular user accounts. If an admin uses the vulnerable plugin with their Apple ID, their account is also at risk. An attacker could gain full control of the site.
Wow. Okay, so this isn't just a minor inconvenience. We're talking like full-on site takeover.
Potentially, yes. And, this really speaks to a broader trend that we're seeing. Third-party authentication vulnerabilities are on the rise.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like every other week there's a new headline about some social login gone wrong. Why is this happening?
Well, I think part of it is just the increase in complexity of plugins. As they integrate more and more features like social logins, they rely on external APIs, and that expands the attack surface.
Right, so more moving parts, more potential points of failure.
Exactly. And, there's also the issue of development priorities. Often, security takes a back seat to functionality, especially when there's pressure to release new features quickly.
It's like that old saying, move fast and break things. But in this case, the things being broken are people's websites.
Sadly, yes.
All right, so let's talk solutions. What can our listeners do to protect themselves?
Well, first and foremost, make sure you're running the latest version of Next-Gen Social Login Pro. They've released version 3.1.17 to address this vulnerability.
So update. We sound like a broken record, but seriously, folks, updates are your first line of defense.
Absolutely. But even with the patch available, we know countless sites will remain vulnerable simply because they haven't updated. It's a constant challenge.
It really is. And you know what? This whole situation really underscores the need for continuous security monitoring and proactive vulnerability management.
Couldn't agree more. Security isn't a one-time task. It's an ongoing process.
Exactly. So beyond just updating plugins, what other proactive steps can our listeners take?
Well, multi-factor authentication is a must-have. It adds an extra layer of security to user accounts, making it much harder for attackers to gain access, even if they manage to steal login credentials.
Right, so even if they get through the front door, they hit a second locked door. Love that analogy. Anything else?
Regular security audits are also crucial. Think of it as a health checkup for your website. It can help identify vulnerabilities before attackers can exploit them. And don't underestimate the power of vulnerability scanners. There are some excellent open source and commercial tools out there that can automatically scan for known vulnerabilities.
Okay, so vulnerability scanners, security audits, multi-factor authentication. It sounds like there's a whole toolkit available to help website owners stay ahead of the security curve.
There is. And don't forget about the human element. Educate yourself and your team about common security threats and best practices. Sometimes the simplest steps, like choosing strong passwords and being wary of phishing emails, can make a world of difference.
Absolutely. Awareness is key. All right, so to wrap things up, we've got a critical vulnerability in a popular social login plugin highlighting this growing trend of third-party authentication issues. The good news is there's a patch, but the bigger takeaway here is the importance of proactive security.
I completely agree.
Stay updated, use multi-factor authentication, conduct regular audits, and use those vulnerability scanners. Don't wait for a security breach to happen before taking action.
Be proactive, not reactive.
Exactly. So before we sign off, I'd like to leave our listeners with a question.
Hit us with it.
What's your security action plan? What steps can you take today, right now, to make your WordPress site and all the data it holds more secure?
That's a great question for everyone to think about. We'd love to hear your thoughts, your tips, your experiences.
Yeah, share them with the Vuln Vibes community. Until next time, stay safe and stay vigilant.
And keep those WordPress sites secure.
You got it.